Are you thinking about traveling around the Dominican Republic on a road trip? As it stands, there's not very much information on how to do this or where to go, and I'm here to help today. In February this year, I went on a road trip myself, and to spice things up, it was in a full-sized RV, which was not as easy as a tiny car to drive around the country, if you can imagine. This was also the first 2 weeks of my 4-month journey through South America, and having been to quite a few of those countries, I can confidently say the Dominican Republic still holds up as a place that is very much worth visiting. Taking a road trip there was so much fun and not too expensive, but when I was researching, there was very little info online about how to do this. So in today's video, I will explain why you'd want to pick a road trip over other travel options in DR, go over a map that I made that has a lot of details and especially like locations where it would be good to travel, and some important tips to keep in mind if you are traveling around rural Dominican Republic. There's a couple rules you should know. In my opinion, taking a road trip there was absolutely the best way to see the country, and there were so many spots that you would not be able to access if you did not have access to a car or RV. But it is important to know some of the other options available if you actually want to travel around Dominican Republic and see what the actual country's like that's not only just the resorts. So there is no real public transportation in DR. There are some buses that take you around the country. You can kind of look at routes, but the main problem with these, they're pretty cheap, it's fine. The main problem is once you get to your destination, there's so many rural spots that are perfect if you have your own means of transportation. And if you don't, you're probably gonna have to rely on hitchhiking or doing something else, which is definitely not for everybody. But if you're a confident hitchhiker, honestly, taking the buses probably wouldn't be too bad of an option. One great thing about that is that the locals were all extremely nice when I was there and very willing to help. So I'd imagine it would be pretty easy up there. That brings us to either taking a car or an RV. And what are some of the differences between those? The one problem with taking a car is that there is nowhere to sleep. So you have to organize your hotels. It does become a little bit more challenging in terms of planning. For us on the RV trip, we basically just left with places we wanted to go in mind, and we're scouting out for sleeping spots along the way, and it worked great. And in my opinion, that is the biggest plus of taking an RV around the Dominican Republic, is that you can sleep where you want. There are very few people that have ever done that, and so that means that there are no people watching out for people sleeping in random spots, like on the beach, which we did multiple nights, and it was amazing. It was the best thing ever. Getting to sleep on the beach, and the way the beaches are there, you can basically just drive up onto the sand. There's nobody patrolling, and it is perfect. You wake up to the sunrise, pristine sand, pristine water, open your door from your nice bed out into the water. It is insane. However, there is some price difference between RV and car, but honestly not huge since a lot of it's tolls and gas anyways. So at this point, you might be wondering who the hell has RVs in Dominican Republic? That is so strange. Well, there is a company, Yaya Camper Vans, who is actually the sponsor of this video. I took the RV around from them for 5 days, and it was amazing. I could definitely highly recommend it. However, they have no say over what goes in this video. I'll put a link to them below, but it's not an affiliate link or anything like that. One of the cool things about them, we had the large camper van named Huate, but they have smaller ones, which is really nice. Like that is the size of cars, especially if you're a couple, that'd be really nice. And then they have some older Volkswagen vans that would be so much fun. That would be actually a dream trip to take one of those around. It's like bright teal, but taking one of those around the country would be so much fun. Surfing, oh my God. As far as I know, Yaya is the only people with RVs in Dominican Republic or camper vans in general, at least that I could find. So going with them is a pretty solid choice, and it was great for me. So there are some pros and cons to all of them, but honestly, I'd recommend splitting a vehicle with your friends to do this because it is absolutely worth it, or family. And when I say these destinations were crazy, they were insane. Like some of these beaches are internationally ranked, and I mean, literally nobody was there while we were there. It was like a dream, actually out of a movie. Now, this brings us to my favorite part of the video, which is my travel map I made of Dominican Republic. And if you can't tell, I'm a little bit obsessed with making these maps. Google has a sort of spin-off software of maps that's called My Maps, and that's what I made for Dominican Republic. It's free. You can download this map in the description if you want. It is so sick, and I'm gonna go through explaining a little bit of the different parts of DR and where I think would be great road trips to do. I'll also have a tutorial linked below that is going through how to make these My Maps, and if you're traveling a lot, they're so much fun to make and to share with your friends if you're going on a trip with multiple people. So basically, this is the map of where I made The areas in purple are the areas I'd recommend visiting, and the areas in red I'll talk a little bit about, but I included a couple pins on there, and I'll sort of just go through these one by one before we start talking about routes a little bit. So there's a couple different areas that look really cool in Dominican Republic. One of them being this upper region of Las Terrenas and Samaná, which is absolutely gorgeous. That's where we were. And some of the beaches here were just insane and like untouched. So much fun. Honestly, this entire north coast, it's not in purple, but I'd highly recommend that as well. And then heading up to Monte Cristi, there are these massive dunes or mountains. It is on the border with Haiti, which honestly would not recommend going to right now. They're having a lot of problems. However, there is some really cool stuff up in this northern region, especially like Luperon, which is another cool little town up there. I have not been up to that section at all, but I've heard very, very good things and would recommend it. The next little bit is this middle section, which is the mountainous region. I hiked here at this red pin, but honestly, driving through there, it was very, very cool, and I'd recommend going to do some of it. I think taking a road trip here too and camping up here would be very cool. Like a lot of people are surprised to know that Dominican Republic has mountains at all, but they're gorgeous and nobody goes there basically. And then another little area I'd talk about too is this national park in the south. This is like very untouched. People definitely do not go here, but it would be cool to explore. And they have a lot of really cool like, I don't know if it's limestone or not, but they have cool bluffs there that I would recommend. But you do get a little close to the border with Haiti as well again, so that's something to watch out for. And if you're nervous about that, probably Samaná is the way to go. And then the two little areas in red here, Santo Domingo and Punta Cana, are basically where you would probably fly into if you're coming to Dominican Republic. Santo Domingo downtown is kind of chaos and like a little bit unsafe in places. And I don't use that word lightly. Very few places are unsafe in Dominican Republic. Probably that's one of them. But Zona Colonial, which is where I was staying, was completely fine. And I would still recommend seeing Santo Domingo. It wasn't my favorite city, but that's one thing to keep in mind. And then Punta Cana, there is nothing, I'll preface this, there is nothing wrong with staying in a resort in Punta Cana to go to Dominican Republic. But in my opinion, you have seen nothing of actual Dominican Republic. If you're going there to relax on vacation, that's fine. Different trip than what I'm planning and talking about in this video. So if you're coming into one of these two places, there are buses that go back and forth. I took the bus from Punta Cana to Santo Domingo, but I rented the RV from Yaya in Santo Domingo, and then that brings me to the routes section of this. And here was my route. So you can go north. We headed north on this highway, which was really solid. Like very nice roads, pretty much as good as US roads, so it was fine. And then heading up into this peninsula, you can kind of see it's more mountainous. It's not crazy, but it was gorgeous as soon as you got up here. And we headed into the little town of Samaná. There's a couple of things to do there, which is cool. And during whale watching season, a bunch of whales come into Samaná Bay, and that was incredible. We got to go out there. So much fun. Would highly recommend it. The first night, we slept at Playa El Valle, which was a very cool place to go. After that, we drove this whole next day around to Playa Rincon. The large RV handled this fine. The roads are pretty solid. And we slept at Playa Rincon for the next night. And oh my God, that was the best beach I've ever been to in my life. I'm not exaggerating. You have to go there. If there's one reason to go to this upper peninsula here, it's Playa Rincon for sure. Then we headed back on this route all the way through this upper part, which definitely go on that part if you're not planning on it. There were some insanely cool mountain passes and the views were just gorgeous. They were so cool. After that, we headed back. We took a little detour and went up north here. Wouldn't really recommend it. The town of Nagua is kind of chaotic, and that is the only time we ran into any issues with the RV, where we were driving a large RV through very small streets. We did not crash. However, there were some wires and was not the best. So wouldn't really recommend going through the towns. When you're driving out like on the freeways and stuff, it's completely fine. But we were like really deep in the town, so it was not a great idea. But after that, we went down, and this was actually a wrong turn detour through this whole part. So that was not on purpose. And we saw some interesting things there. Probably wouldn't recommend it. Probably you could just go back on the freeway. Now, this was my route. I definitely would recommend doing it. It was very cool. But if I were to go back to Dominican Republic to do different routes, there are two that I came up with and that would be worth checking out here. The first is this southern route, which I would be very interested to do this just because I enjoy travel and seeing interesting and different things. This lake in the south, Lago Enriquillo, is truly strange looking. There's crocodiles. I researched it a little bit. It looks very, very cool. And going through this southern portion, I have done none of this, so disclaimer. However, this would be a very cool route I would probably try and do in the future. Especially, it includes this national park in the south, and then heading up through these little mountains here as well, which would be, I think would be really cool. That's one of the routes. The second route is this northern route that is, I'll turn off my original map here. So this is the second route I came up with, and it would be going north up to Monte Cristi and then along this northern coast. And you could do it either way around, but I think driving along this coast would be gorgeous and totally worth exploring. I've heard very, very good things about Puerto Plata, and then this Parque Nacional Isabel de Torres. So, and I had some stuff saved there to do. There's some really cool stuff along this North Shore, heading through Luperon and then up to Monte Cristi. And then you also get to go through Santiago de los Caballeros, which is, I've heard, quite a cool city for Dominican culture and whatnot. So that's the second route I came up with. Again, you can download this map in the description. I made it for this video, so I hope you get some value out of it. Now, this brings us to the last part of the video, which is important tips to keep in mind when you're doing a road trip and traveling around the DR, which there are a couple of things that really threw me off that were different than other countries, especially around the Caribbean and South America, that are important to keep in mind. The first is tolls, and there are a lot of tolls in Dominican Republic that are not cheap. In total, going to do the loop from Samaná and back to Santo Domingo was around $60 to $80 in tolls, but you sort of just have to factor that into the cost of your road trip. Now, you can avoid these tolls if you go early in the morning or late at night. When we were leaving on our trip, we hit some of them early and it was great because we didn't have to pay them at all. They're just open. But during like midday and stuff, when you're going through, there are some expensive ones and it would be great to miss those. If you're driving late at night, probably wouldn't recommend that, but we did it a little bit and it was fine. These tolls are also all paid in Dominican peso in cash. They don't take cards. So getting cash and getting Dominican pesos is my next tip. That was really a pain in the ass for me because I didn't take enough US dollars to exchange when I was there. And the ATMs in DR, especially in Santo Domingo and Zona Colonial, if you're staying there, were hard to use. They charged fees. It was all sorts of drama with my cards, and I would definitely recommend bring cash, just exchange it at an exchange place there, and you will be set much easier. So that brings me to my next tip, which is the tourist island tax. I think it's like a VAT tax of 18% on pretty much everything if you are not from DR, which is totally sucky, but it's part of the importing things there and it is real. It's not a scam. So a lot of the restaurants we ate at, you'll take the menu price of the restaurant and you add 18% base with no tip or anything like that. Even though a lot of the restaurants we went to weren't that expensive, it sort of adds up and is definitely something to keep in mind, but you're not getting scammed if they're charging you exactly that 18% extra. And I looked into this before the trip. Taking a road trip around DR, I got to see exactly what the culture was like, and is that it was loud. It was extremely loud, and every little town we went to, especially when we took that wrong turn inland, it was extremely loud. When I'm saying loud, I mean they strapped full speakers to the roofs of their cars, were blaring it around town. Every little shop had a speaker going max volume. It was pretty crazy. And then the motorbikes are also, I don't think mufflers exist in Dominican Republic. So it was so loud that I definitely, after leaving and going to places like Colombia or Peru, was like, wow, this is really way more quiet. And there were some points like on the remote beaches there that were very, very quiet, except most of driving around, even in pretty rural areas, it is quite loud. It's no secret that everyone in DR speaks Spanish. There weren't too many English speakers, especially if you're in rural spots. So I would highly recommend Spanish, learning Spanish and knowing some Spanish if you're going to take a road trip around rural areas. But it's honestly great to know. If you know Spanish, you can travel so much of South and Central America and the Caribbean that it is absolutely worth it. I had limited Spanish when I went there. I understood and could speak it decently, but I definitely recommend practicing your Duolingo or something else before you go there because it will help you. If you're on the fence about a trip like this, I put together my best drone shots for my whole trip and they were incredible. You can see some of the beaches in there. You can go watch that video now. If you're thinking about doing a trip like this, there's a lot of other resources on Yaya's website where they have some good stuff, but I would highly recommend taking a road trip in general in Dominican Republic. It is absolutely worth it, and especially when you can sleep right on the beach. It was epic. So I hope you found this helpful, and go download the map in the description if you want it. See you next time.